Hi, thank you for joining us today with Optimistic American and our book club. We have a special guest today, Joel Trammell, who is the author of the CEOS, which is the Chief Executive Operating System. And this book came across to it after I read the Manager Playbook, and a book before that. So let me introduce our guest today, Joel Trammell. Joel Trammell is a serial entrepreneur and lifelong learner about building great organizations. His leadership had led to multiple successful exits and exceptional investor returns over his 30-year career. Trammell is the owner of CEO Magazine, which reaches more than 10,000 CEOs across the state. He is a pioneer in the field of CEO education and training. After decades as a CEO, a field that averages a shelf life of only 5 years, Trammell identified a pervasive problem. Many of his fellow business leaders seriously lack the fundamental tools and education to make their companies truly great. He launched his website to provide the support and guidance his peers were lacking. And he also wrote the book, The CEO Tightrope, and recently co-authored a new book titled The Chief Executive Operating System, which is the first of its kind, an essential playbook for the CEO role. As a leader and CEO educator, Trammell regularly speaks at conferences and events nationwide. He has contributed to Entrepreneur, Forbes, and Inc.com, sharing his experience-based insight on business leadership topics. He has served on the boards of public, private, and nonprofit organizations, and he was named Chairman Emeritus of the Austin Technology Council and regularly teaches a course for Austin CEOs. So through that, welcome, Joel Trammell. Joel Trammell.
Good to be with you.
So, Joel, I got introduced to you by actually going to this beautiful complex that is near Austin, Texas, close to Smithville, Texas. And I was at the complex, and I like to share to people that you have to have an open mind when you're doing things and be open to change. And I was actually there not for business. I was there with some family and saw the book, The Manager's Playbook. And as a person who is constantly trying to learn, I picked up the book and I actually read it over the weekend while I was there, and with family razzing me that I shouldn't be just sitting there reading a book. But I found myself very intrigued. I liked the book, got through it in a weekend, and just have to say, well done with that book. But also, what I want to start with, that complex you have there, what was the original vision of creating that complex there near Austin?
Yeah, so, the big thing, I had reached a point in my career where I didn't want to be on the road. I wanted to have influence with CEOs and business leaders. So I wanted to create an excuse for them to come to the Austin area so I could stay at home and do what I wanted to do. And so that was the birth of what we call the Texas CEO Ranch, which I purchased back in 2019 and have now built into a 15-bedroom, 23-bed resort complex with 1,000 square foot custom-built training room and all kinds of fun facilities, electric bikes, fishing, golf, all the standard amenities that you would expect at a resort.
I have to say, it was my first time riding an electric bike, and I did not crash. So that was good. But I do have to give it to you that I've stayed at a lot of complexes or been to retreats, company retreats or leadership retreats, and that facility set up very well for retreats and leadership and training. You've done an excellent job. So I commend on that setup because I really enjoyed it. We're going back next summer, so I'm excited to be going back there next summer. So let's get into your newest book, The Chief Executive Operational System, and I am somebody who I've read Vern Harnish's Scaling Up, and we actually use in my organization the Scaling Up methodology. And before that, we used Gino Wickman's EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. And we found that as we got bigger, the Scaling Up started to fit our model. But what I liked about your book is it was tailored to the CEO. And tell me, where did this start? Did it start with the CEO Tightrope and you wanted to add on to it? Or where did this concept come from for the CEOS?
Yeah, when I first wrote the CEO Tightrope, well, I first started doing research for it actually and teaching the course. I thought I would find that Harvard had a system and Stanford had a system, and I would come in as the practitioner and tell people they were being too academic or theoretical. But then when I started looking out there, once you get kind of past the startup phase and really get to a fully operating business, 100 plus employees, whatever, there really wasn't a lot of literature or thought around what the CEO's job was at that point. So when I wrote the CEO Tightrope, I wanted to kind of lay out some of my ideas. You're always worried that you're going to put something out, and somebody's going to say, "Well, you didn't think about this," and you go, "Duh, I should have thought about that." But the CEO Tightrope actually got well received, and I didn't get a lot of does. What I got was, okay, that's great. You've given me the theoretical layout for what I should do. Now, what exactly do I go do tomorrow at 8:00 in the morning when I go in the office? And so that was really the impetus for Chief Executive Operating System, was to get even more prescriptive and say, here are the tools and techniques you use to accomplish these responsibilities that are unique to the CEO role.
Yeah, that's great. And when you look at, you obviously were a CEO that didn't have a playbook. You were, working through experience and working as you grew as a CEO. I'm curious of what did you lean on to be successful as a CEO before even having a book like this?
Yeah, well, I have been a lifelong learner. And so, I read every, kind of hot business book that was out there, tried to take pieces. And, I tell people I don't know how much I invented per se of this. This is really a curation process of taking great ideas from many great authors along the way that I've read. But again, putting it into a systematic way to think about it. There are a lot of great business books out there that have a good niche idea in a particular area, and you say that's great. But if you don't have some sort of framework or system to hang it on, it's just kind of an anecdotal piece of information. And so I read extensively. One of the books that really influenced me was the Gallup's book around what makes great managers. Now Break All the Rules was the original title of the book, probably some 25 years ago from Gallup. Had a lot of research around what employees needed in the workplace to be productive and successful. And it was very data driven, so it applied to the engineer in me. But certainly, Maxwell's written a lot of great stuff on leadership. Lencioni's got some great stuff on teamwork. I steal from all of them profusely, just like I expect people to steal ideas from me. And, but again, tried to put it together in a usable format that really helps a CEO who's got day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah, I had a business leader that I won't name just in case, but that would teach you it's R&D, rip off and duplicate. So when you sat down and were writing the Chief Executive Operating System, did you have a vision or an end goal of what that looked like? Or did you meaning what you wanted to accomplish with the book? Or was it something that you found yourself writing through and just it was coming to you as you were writing it?
Yeah, no, it was something that I had developed both for personal use as I had taken over later in my career various CEO roles, as well as having for the past 15, maybe coming on 20 years now, taught a CEO course on a fairly regular basis. And so, teaching the course, every time you teach it, you refine, you get questions from the students, you get things they didn't quite resonate with them, you rework it, whatever. And then I had the opportunity to take over a couple of companies and really think about, okay, systematically, how should I approach this and what makes sense, what works, what doesn't, what are the pitfalls. And so when we sat down to write the book, it was pretty much baked from a lot of teaching and actually doing and running organizations.
And when you look at the book, obviously, as an author, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, is give me what's your favorite part of the book or what's your favorite section that you enjoyed writing out of it?
Yeah, so, one of the most fundamental things that I've proposed and it comes up. It just about 80% of the time I'm talking to a CEO about a problem, it comes up. Is my kind of fundamental model for how to think about a business, mental model for that, which I call the two triangles of tension. That is something that I think a lot of people have never gotten a clear mental model in their head. Or if they've done a startup, they've had a very simple mental model. I mean, most people's mental model of business is I have some product, I try to sell it, and I try to do that without running out of money. And that's actually a perfectly good mental model in the early stages of a business and an organization. But once you get past product market fit and you're scaling the business and you have a full team and you have 100 employees, and then you need to think about the business very differently. And so that change in mental model, I think, is a very valuable helping tool for people to get their arms around what the CEO really has to balance and manage.
Yeah, and I liked how you took the two triangles and then turned that also into the org chart that then the CEO is responsible for. And when I look at organizations, and I'm part of Cameron Herold COO Alliance, it's a national group for chief operating officers. And when I look at that group and we talk about org charts within organizations, and this is all levels of industry from healthcare to manufacturing, and when I look at it, every org chart is different of who reports to the CEO. I mean, sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's, the CFO reports up to him, but then other times it's not. So with your experience, do you feel that those 6 roles that you identify in the book, which, marketing is one, sales is another, product, and then you've got the financial role, which you list of shareholders,
CFO usually represents that.
which the CFO, then you have a customer experience, and then the people, the HR, role, right? Do you find that's the standard?
Well, I would say that is the simplest model. There are certainly other people who might need to be added, in organizations where IT is a big component. They're a productivity enabler for employees, so they fit under that employee focus. There are certain organizations where legal provides a necessary function reporting directly to the CEO. So there certainly can be additions, but what I don't like seeing is one of those fundamental 6 functions reporting to one of the other functions and not reporting to the CEO.
And where can you give an example where you've seen that where it didn't work? Maybe I've seen sometimes sales under marketing, right? Or vice versa, even.
Or vice versa. Yeah, those are, I just wrote a blog post on that, why sales and marketing are different animals, and, they're cats and dogs, and you need to keep them separate. They do different things. Sales and marketing particularly have different time scales to think about. Sales is a very here and now. If it doesn't happen in this quarter to sales, it really doesn't matter. Marketing's a very much a long-term time frame. They're doing things today that may not pay fruit for 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the road. And so I've never seen somebody who is both good at being tactical and strategic at the same time. That's just not a skill set you're going to find. And same thing with customer. I've seen customer executives, customer success, customer experience, whatever you want to call it, being put under sales, where it really becomes a junior sales role. And it's very focused on deals and revenue instead of truly representing the customer. Because I have a belief that the only way to build a sustainable and thriving business is to consistently deliver value to customers, employees, and shareholders all at the same time. Any one of those groups can ruin you. If you don't deliver value to customers, you don't have a business. If you don't deliver value to employees, you don't have a business. You don't deliver value to shareholders, you don't have a business. And so I want, as a CEO, I want to hear directly from somebody that's representing each of those voices at the table in every key meeting.
And I've heard, just talking on the customer experience, there are discussions I've had with leaders about if you have a customer experience leader, if you need one, then you have a culture problem because you have customer issues. I was curious, how do you, when I read your book, I didn't think that was your intent of I got to have a customer experience person so they can handle all the issues that are happening with customers. I view it as you have somebody who has the vision to ensure we're providing a pristine product. So, almost an operator or, somebody who's ensuring that the customers are taken care of. So I viewed it as more forward-facing vision, but curious if I read that correctly or how you envision that leader of the customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that there's a balance here, natural tension. I mean, anything you provide to customers is a resource that could have gone to employees or shareholders. Anything you provide to shareholders is a resource that could have gone to employees and customers. They're in a natural state of tension together. And so, yes, obviously, we want to provide great customer service, but that is only a piece of customer experience. What I want to represent is I want to get a mind meld from all my customers and know what it is they would like me as an organization to do that would provide the most value to them. And if I don't have somebody who's actively engaged with those customers, not trying to sell them something, which is a totally different exercise, but actually trying to maximize the value they're receiving from my products, if I don't have somebody actively gathering that information, it's really hard to balance those needs. And that's what I found with most organizations. They have a tremendous amount of shareholder data, financial data, profit and loss, balance sheet, all that information, which is very shareholder centric. They often lack any good data about employees as a group or customers as a group. And I just think that's very dangerous because those can sink you just as fast as shareholders do if you get crossways with either group.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. And I see the power in that. In Vern Harnish's Scaling Up, he talks about in his weekly meeting that the leaders need to be talking about employees and customers every single week, that there has to be a check-in of what are our employees saying and what are our customers saying. So it fits very in tune with that. And I believe that when organizations, I see it where you get busy in the day-to-day, somebody loses touch with just asking a customer, how are things going? And what are some things you'd like to see out of us in the future, right? Getting that feedback, but then also that connection of what's going on in your industry. And so that you're aware and you have an ear to the ground of changes that are going to be happening to those industries that you maybe serve. There's lots of power in that. And especially right now with the economy, we're not really sure what organizations are going to have any type of effects here in the future. And if we're not keeping an ear to the ground, we might be behind the ball on changes that could be occurring.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just a key data source to me.
Yeah. Yes. And it is. So tell me, now let's, as you look at you're leading that team that's reporting to the CEO, what did you find as the most successful way to have touch points with those people? And in your book, I know you talk about different meeting rhythms that you can have, but what worked well for you as a CEO?
Well, first of all, there are some fundamental conversations you need to have as CEO with every executive that works for you. You need to have a clear understanding of what they're responsible for. I mean, I like a clear, one sentence description. I mean, I remember asking a young customer service exec one time what he was responsible for in our organization. And he came back with a list of about 50 things, close trouble tickets, update servers, do this, do that. I said, no, I think you're responsible for making sure my customers are happy. And he went, oh, yeah, you're right. And so, executives should have broad areas of responsibility, and you should capture that and be very clear what that area of responsibility is. Then you need to be very clear about what their authority level is. What decisions can they make without consulting you? What decisions do they need to ask you about? And then the conversation I had with every new exec that worked for me is I would say, hey, what are the 3 key metrics that we're going to be using to judge the performance of your department? And so we would come up, and usually they'd volunteer 1 or 2. I'd have 1 or 2, whatever. We'd haggle for a little while and figure out what are those typically 3-4 metrics that we're going to use to measure the performance of their department. And I wanted that displayed publicly for everybody to see what every group was going to be measured on. And then once you've done all that, then you can talk about setting quarterly goals and managing from an execution phase in your weekly meetings around those quarterly goals. But I think it's very important to lay that foundation of responsibilities, authority, and key metrics first, so that everybody's clear what the purpose of the exercise is.
Yeah. And do you find yourself wanting to have do you like meeting with your leadership team individually, one-on-one in a scheduled type meeting, or do you like having it more ad hoc where you're touching base with them here or there on things, but you meet with the team more on a weekly basis? What do you like?
Yeah, I like doing both. I mean, I like having a weekly team meeting. That weekly team meeting, though, for me is only 30 minutes. It's not a 2-hour session where we beat issues to death and solve a bunch of problems. It is a status update on the key goals that we've identified as an organization. And I've run everything from a new startup to a $1 billion public company on a 30-minute meeting. Then I do believe in having one-on-ones with my direct reports on a weekly basis. Those are critically important. As a manager, even, I don't think people realize you're probably the first or second most impactful person in an employee's life if you're their manager. And of course, this is especially true for younger employees. And so if you don't have those touch points scheduled on a regular basis, I don't know how you manage them, because that's what, when somebody's important to you, you want their time, you want their respect, you want them to listen to you, and all those things are really important. It's only gotten more important as we've moved to more distributed work environments where we don't necessarily run into people in the hall or go to lunch with them or whatever in the day-to-day activities. So I think both, but meetings need to be short and to the point and have a clear purpose to the meeting.
Very good. So one of the things that I enjoyed with your book was the connection to annual reviews and how you view annual reviews. And my method is the old way of looking at annual reviews is, hey, I meet with this person once a year, I give them performance feedback, and the person waits an entire year almost to give that person the feedback. And it doesn't really serve that team member justice, because the leader really is only evaluating the last 2 to 3 months of the year. They're not evaluating the entire year because it's what is on their mind. And for the team member, it doesn't help serve a purpose for them because they didn't get feedback all year, so they don't really know how they were doing. I use the example, if you have kids and your kid does something great, you're not going to say, oh, I should tell them about that at their quarterly review or at their annual review. No, you tell your kid right away, you did that amazing thing. Or if they do something they shouldn't do, you don't say, oh, I should tell them not to touch that hot stove at their next review. No, you tell them right away, hey, let's not do that. And then you show them and you teach them and you coach them. So that's my perspective. And when I was reading your book, you had a similar perspective. So could you give just your view around how to use annual reviews more so for a goal check-in, or looking at how is this person getting to their targets? And what do you look at on how to give performance feedback to a leader or to a team?
Yeah, I mean, performance reviews have, don't work. I mean, 99% of the companies that do performance reviews, they're either at best a neutral, or in most cases, I think they have a negative impact on motivation. Because like you say, we wait for a year and then we ask the manager to make up a bunch of data about the employee, and they only remember the last month, and they forget about the time 6 months ago when the employee stayed late and really worked hard and saved a big project. And most of them are then tied to pay, and that also. So when you're talking about performance, the employee's hearing how you're going to short shrift me on pay, and so it's really the worst thing that corporate America does. And so first of all, the first thing is performance reviews and pay should be totally divorced. I could go into my whole objective pay philosophy. We don't have time for that, but you need to have an objective pay philosophy that's independent of performance. And then you need to set up performance reviews in a way that is helpful, that is a coaching session. And the only way that I've found to do that is to define ahead of time what it is you're going to measure people on for their performance. And so that's the problem. Most people have no measurement, and then they get to the end of the year and it just feels random to the employee. If instead each quarter you say, here are your 5 key objectives and here's how we're going to measure them each quarter, then the coaching session at the end of the quarter is simply about how you did on those 5 key objectives that we defined at the beginning of the quarter. And it is seen as a way to actually help the employee get better at their job, not as a way to punish them or pay them less or make an excuse to let them go at the next layoff.
Do you believe there's a personality that fits for CEOs? Like, is there a certain type, or do you believe there could be various personalities that can make it work as a CEO?
Yeah, so I think to say a personality, there are certain behavioral traits that tend to get rewarded more in leadership than others, okay? For instance, some people are quick to make decisions. Some people are very slow to make decisions. Turns out there's pretty good research that making quicker decisions, all other things being equal, is better in a position of leadership than being slow to make decisions. So that is a personality characteristic that people have. There's also certain personality characteristics that people tend to step up when there's challenge, a problem, they step forward. Certain other people step back. Well, the people who step forward are more likely to be put into CEO and other leadership positions because they volunteer to be there, right? We don't force people to be CEO if they don't want to, and we don't force people even to move up in management. And so the people who tend to get there tend to have a certain set of personality characteristics as well. I would not necessarily say that all of those personality characteristics are the best for the job, however. And really what you need to be able to do if you want to be an exceptional CEO is learn how to exhibit all the different personality characteristics depending upon what the situation calls for. Even decision making, there are certain times when the right thing to do is to study and analyze and think about it and take a long time to make a decision. Most of the time, that's not the case, but there are certainly times when that is important, and being able to recognize when that's important and step back and do that is really what the great CEOs are able to do. They're able to kind of ignore their own personality tendencies and use whatever behavioral characteristics are best for the situation, and also augment their personality characteristics with other people who have different characteristics and learn how to use those people to make themselves successful.
And do you find that, or when you look at CEOs, do they need the ability, or have you seen success in the ability to change their leadership styles depending on how they're working with their executive team?
Yeah, so whether it's change the style or make accommodations. So a great example, let's say you're somebody who tends to make very quick decisions and doesn't naturally ask for other people's input when making a decision. It's not necessarily because you don't want other people's input. You just expect them to be like you. If they have something to say, you expect them to say it. And so if somebody doesn't say anything, you're like, they must not have anything to say. We'll go on to the next topic, right? So what you can do if you know you're that type personality is, hey, every time we make a big decision around here, I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to say, hey, Guy, what do you think about that? Hey, John, what do you think about that? And everybody knows they're going to have to express their opinion, and they're going to be given that opportunity because my natural personality would be to ignore them, not because I don't think their opinion's important, but because I'm the type personality. If I have something to say, you're not going to be able to stop me from saying it. Yep. But not everyone's like that. And so what you need to do often is find out where you have extreme personality behaviors, and CEOs have many of those often. And then you either through people or process, you need to put in place things that complement that behavior. And so that's just an example where you put in a process that you say, I'm going to ask everybody in the room. One of my personality traits, I have an Eeyore stuffed doll that my team affectionately gave me. Eeyore being, always famous for going, "The sky is falling," right? And so, my personality tends to be negative if I allow it. So what do I do about that? Well, I can do a couple of things. I can hire somebody on my team who's a very optimistic, positive person, and they can be rah-rah. Also, in my team meeting each week, I make everybody come to the meeting with a win for that week, something positive that happened, because I'm not going to find those things. Now, you could be the opposite, though. You may be one of these super optimistic CEOs. That's probably more common. I call them the cheerleader CEO, that everything's great. Well, you may need to have everybody on your team bring a problem to you every week. Otherwise, you're going to ignore those things. And so these are ways you kind of augment your natural personality. You don't change it. I'm still Eeyore. I'm not going to change Eeyore. But I, through people and process, figure out ways to provide leadership to the whole organization, not just the people who are like me.
Yeah, it's finding the balance of your leadership style, other people's leadership styles, and finding how they can work together to be successful.
Absolutely.
So, and in the book, I did enjoy your discussion of writing, paper about who you are as a person, as a leader, and sharing that with your team so they know how to work with you. Where did that start with you, or where did you first try that? I really liked that concept.
Yeah, so it first started with me. I was in a business where we hired 100 people in one 12-month period to go from 100 to 200. I did 252 interviews personally to hire those 100 people. And then I met with those 100 people after they started, sometimes individually, sometimes in small groups. And I found myself giving the same speech over and over again of things that people have observed about me that they found unusual or different or didn't expect. And, there are many things. For instance, if somebody would send me a 3 or 4 paragraph email with all kinds of details in it, and then at the bottom ask me a question, "Hey, Joel, I'm going to do this. Is that okay?" I might send a reply that was 3 letters, YES. And I found, I thought I was saving people time. I was answering their question. But some people react to that like, "Oh, well, Joel's mad at me," or "Joel didn't appreciate," or "he didn't read the whole message," or something. And so these were things I would point out to people during giving this speech. And then after I'd given the speech about 10 times, I'm like, "Dummy, why don't you just write it down and hand it to people so they don't have to listen and I don't have to give the speech every time, and they can refer to it when they have to go deal with me to go, oh, don't be surprised if Joel sends a very short response to my email. It's not because he's mad at me. It's not because he doesn't like me. It's just he's very direct and short in his communication style."
Yeah, I'm like you in that I've had to repeat myself multiple times to teach people, no, this is a way I respond. It doesn't mean this, or this is the way I do this. It doesn't mean how you're interpreting it. And so when I read your book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense of just giving somebody a playbook of how to work with me.
And I will point out, you can go to myusermanual.co as a site we set up for free that will help you generate and draft your own user manual.
Awesome.
So that's a good place to get started.
So as we start to wrap up here, I would be curious of what's the biggest message you want to give about either being a CEO or about the CEO's book that would be important for CEOs to understand or hear out there?
I think the biggest thing I'm trying to communicate to people is there is a way to do the job that can be learned, that can reduce your stress. It isn't going to solve all your problems. I mean, business is always ups and downs. You're going to have good quarters and bad quarters. But I think a lot of CEOs are just constantly stressed because they don't feel like they have any method to their madness. They just go into the office and the problems start showing up and they try to play whack-a-mole on those problems. And then they go home at the end of the day and worry about what the problems are going to be tomorrow. And if you're doing the job that way, there's a better way to do it. I've run big companies and still take my kids every Friday to dinner. I still go play tennis and golf when I want to go play tennis and golf. This doesn't have to be an all-consuming job. if you understand some of these fundamentals. And I don't think there's no rocket science here. It does require some discipline to follow the system. But if you follow that system, I think you can do the CEO job in a much more stress-free and productive way. And that I really, I think there are a lot of CEOs out there that are really stressed that I think we can help.
Awesome. Well, Joel, it's been great talking with you. And for all of our listeners, there's 2 books out there, The Manager's Playbook and The Chief Executive Operating System. Really, both books, great books, and state-of-the-art training facility in Austin, Texas. So definitely, if you're a business in Texas, please check it out. I enjoyed staying there myself. So it is really a great complex for businesses coming together, and a great place for training and learning and development. So again, Joel, thank you so much for joining us on The Optimistic American.
Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for joining The Optimistic American Show. Help us grow by subscribing to our channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like and a comment. There is so much more that we have planned. We can't wait for you to embark upon this journey with us.